Welcome all to our COVID-19 case management series. Today we are being hosted by PSK. So I'm going to invite Esther Anyango to take over. Esther, welcome.
Hello, attendees. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this webinar series. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you, and thank you so much, KMA, for hosting this webinar in collaboration with other healthcare professionals. My name is Anyango, as I said, my name is Anyango Esther. I'm a pharmacist intern and also an intern with a International Pharmaceutical Federation, FIP. And I will be moderating this session today, which is entitled Pharmacovigilance. So this is the third PSK webinar in this series, and last week we were talking on manufacturing, and it's a pleasure that we get to talk about pharmacovigilance this week. So I'd also like to take this opportunity to invite all the senior members of all the healthcare professions that have joined us. So esteemed colleagues, please feel welcome and warm, and I hope you do have an amazing webinar and that you learn something. So just a quick reminder to every one of us, please I'd like to remind you to subscribe to your regulatory bodies portals for this event, because it's a CME, so that you guys can get your CPD points. I'd also like to inform you guys that these webinars occur every single Thursday, so please tune in and get to know the topics that are going to be discussed every Thursdays, and every Tuesdays there's going to be one on mental health. And on that point, just to remind you guys that if you need any services, any mental health services, the call center is open for each and every one of us. So please kindly feel free to call in if you need the services of our mental health specialist. So again, thank you so much for inviting PSK for this CME. And as we get started, I'd like to request us to introduce ourselves on the chat box. So please just tell us who you are, tell us where you're listening from, just so that we get a feel of who is here and who is with us. So I will start us off once again. I am Anyango Esther, and I'm listening in from Nairobi. And it's a pleasure to see everyone who's already introduced themselves. So Dr. Mageto, welcome. You're listening to us from Kisii, so it's a pleasure that you're inside. Dorcas Njeri Njuguna, welcome. Dr. Wanagwe, welcome very much. Dr. Ogonji, so thank you so much for those guys who are introducing themselves. And at this point in time, I'll just dive in to introduce the topic, and then we are going to introduce our speakers. So just continue to introduce yourself, just so that we can feel warm. Even though we are separated by distance, just type in your name and where you're listening to us from. So pharmacovigilance, that's the topic that we are tackling today. And I'll just give a brief introduction of what pharmacovigilance is for those of us who may not be very familiar about this topic. And then after I give a brief introduction, I will just go ahead to introduce our speakers, and then we'll listen in. So basically, pharmacovigilance is basically a science, a group of activities that involve detection, assessment, and understanding, and a prevention of adverse effects and other drug-related safety problems. So eventually, the objective of pharmacovigilance is basically to promote the safe and effective use of healthcare products. And this is all in a bid to promote health and public health, among patients, among the general public, among healthcare professionals. So various activities are normally involved in pharmacovigilance, and this include medication errors, a lack of efficacy reports, off-label use, acute and chronic poisoning, an assessment of drug-related mortality, abuse and misuse of healthcare products, adverse interactions of medicines, chemicals, and other drugs. So basically, that's all that pharmacovigilance entails. If I was to define pharmacovigilance in 2 words, I'd say it's just drug safety. So basically, pharmacovigilance is drug safety. And the approach of pharmacovigilance can be either clinical, it can be epidemiological, experimental, or even diagnostics. And I came across an interesting study that was done in 2018 on the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of pharmacovigilance in developing countries. And this was a study that was done by Dixon Thomas et al. And he gave some few interesting insights that I thought were necessary for us to understand, before we delve into this presentation. So first of all, a positive thing about pharmacovigilance in developing countries. They say that pharmacovigilance systems are gaining ground in developing countries, and I think that's a very, very good thing. And second thing they point out is that healthcare professionals, including medical doctors, nurses, pharmacists, have a poor to moderate knowledge on pharmacovigilance. They have a positive attitude towards pharmacovigilance, and they have poor practice of pharmacovigilance. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And they reckon that continuing education will improve the knowledge, attitude, and practice of pharmacovigilance. So I think we are here to just, get more knowledge on pharmacovigilance. And at this point in time, I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Koi Mathenge. She's the founder and the CEO and a contract specialist in pharmacovigilance at her company, which is PVCC Limited. It's a rapidly growing consultancy firm that specializes in pharmacovigilance and drug safety services. She's also a registered pharmacist by the profession, and she holds a master's in pharmacovigilance and pharmacoepidemiology. So Dr. Koi, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And at this point in time, I'd like to invite you for about 30 minutes to share a presentation with us where we will get to learn more about pharmacovigilance. So Dr. Koi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Esther, for that good introduction. As you heard, my name is Dr. Koi. I'm trying to navigate my screen here so that I can share with you what I have in store. If you can see my slides, please just let me know. Yeah, can any one of you see my slides? Dr. Nyango, can you confirm if you can see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. So as you heard, my name is Dr. Koi Mathenge. Officially, people still refer me as Wangoi Mathenge. I'm still one and the same person. I am the founder and the CEO of Pharmacovigilance Competence Center, as you've heard. And I'll take briefly 1-2 slides just to talk about my company, just for anyone who may be interested. We are the lead consultant outsourcing firm offering pharmacovigilance and drug safety services in Africa. And we try to do this by enhancing IT solutions in a way just to ensure data privacy, data protection, and also the integrity of the data. We try to do this by providing holistic quality services. And we are initially we started with the pharmaceutical companies, but with time we've seen that our services have been cutting across to other life sciences organizations, like medical devices, cosmetics, cannabis-derived products, and whatnot. And those are our core values. At the moment, we have been privileged to have a footing in several countries in Africa. So currently we've provided our services in about 36 countries in Africa in one way or another, either on short-term basis or on long-term contracts. And we are happy to serve the healthcare industry in just trying to realize the potential through incorporation of drug safety services. I'm not going to talk about myself. That's what Dr. Nyango has done. But just briefly as what everyone, just for your information, these are my credentials. And if you want to know more about me, you can follow me on my social media. Okay, so the topic for today, and I'm seeing someone already raising their hand. Yeah, anyway. As we continue, I just wanted to have a reaction from you guys. And this is where I wanted to invite you to just tell me in your own capacity as a person, first of all, before a healthcare professional, has any of you, and you can just put your answers in the chat box, has any of you ever experienced an adverse event in form of a side effect after taking medication? Can we see those reactions? Can I invite you to just go to the chat box and just mention whether you have ever come across any of this? And my other question is, when you got your side effects, what did you do about it? Did you report it? Did you change your medication, or did you just go on with your day-to-day activities? What happened? All right. Okay. So the reason of why I introduced, because we, in most cases, especially when you see some of us coming here to talk, we always talk about the patient as someone who is very, very far off, and we're not related to that. And I just wanted to bring that into concept in our discussion, that when we're talking about the patient, I want at the end of this presentation, I want you to consider yourself in a future occurrence. You can potentially be a patient, and therefore how you react today and how you act even towards your healthcare professionals, or to any patient who comes across your day-to-day practice, what are you expected to do? You know, are you going to ignore them, or are you going to just take that small initiative and report that adverse event, and we see how it's going to take us from there? So as an introduction, I like using this slide mainly about Kenya. We know that the Kenyan population currently is about close to 50 million people. And then from this, we saw that in a study, the Kenyan healthcare sector, a market study report by the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands on opportunities for the Dutch life sciences and healthcare, actually came up with this. I extrapolated this from their study, and they said during this period of time, around 2012, 2013, the healthcare accounts provided an insight that Kenya spends closely around 2,734 million USD in healthcare. And this is just, the figures are just about, they may not be accurate as of today. We know that the figures have gone higher, but just for statistical purposes, I wanted to draw some relations in relation to these figures that we are going to bring out after my slide. Yeah, these at that time constitute to about 7% of the Kenya GDP. Close to 70% of this figure that was spent on healthcare budget was actually on pharmaceuticals. There was another study that also stated that at that period of time, between the year 2010 and 2020, there were expectations that the pharma industry or the pharmaceutical market or the access of products in the African market was going to grow annually at an estimated rate of 9.8%, meaning we are going to expect a huge lot of products accessible to our patients and to us as a whole. That also meant, consequently, that the Africa healthcare spending rose from 28.4 billion USD around the year 2000 to around 117 billion when we crossed over to the 2010s, that is in 2012, meaning that the figures have also gotten higher, especially now during the COVID-19 season, where we've seen many organizations, many countries all over the world just remodeling and rechanging and reshaping their budgets to ensure that a lot of that budget caters to the current healthcare needs that their country needs. However, based on a study presentation that was done by Uppsala Monitoring Center, UMC, it actually stated that unfortunately less than 4,000 adverse event reports had been reported by the year 2017. And yet we are having a surplus of drugs in Africa, based on the numbers that we had shared. And so my question to you is, do you think that we do any, are we impacting ourselves, especially as pharmacovigilantes or as drug safety practitioners in Africa and in Kenya? Are we supporting in this narrative showing that things are okay in Africa that we do not need to report? Is that the reality on the ground? I honestly don't think so. I think based on also how people commented, we do get to experience adverse events, especially because we have we are exposed to so many issues whenever it comes to drugs, including trading of counterfeit medication, where a lot of our patients have been having the unfortunate effect of having counterfeit products at their beckon, just because of price issues. I will not belabor what Dr. Nyango said, but just as a definition of where we are and where we are headed is an introduction of pharmacovigilance. And for me, I really wanted to highlight on this last sentence where I say popularly known as side effects. Yeah, because sometimes, in as much as we know that a side effect is something that is already known, we end up, or get over it. We have that attitude and we give that attitude to the patients. Just get over it. It's going to get easier. We know these things happen, Or sometimes we see even a patient, because they know once a report is not going to be affected on it, sometimes they just keep quiet on it and they continue suffering in silence. And the whole essence of today was to just highlight on why it's important for us to report adverse event. So the goal for us, and the goal that I want to preach today is the importance of drug safety. The first and most important one is it helps us in meeting the regulatory requirements as a country. I'm not sure if anyone, I'm not sure if you guys are aware that the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, Kenya, actually has a PV center, and that is a national center that has been registered and organized in Kenya for handling all product safety, drug safety, pharmacovigilance issues in Kenya as a country. And therefore, they are expected and they are mandated to actually provide regulations and requirements on what is expected whenever it comes to handling drug product issues in relations to drug safety. With that, Pharmacy and Poisons Board has actually provided guidelines, and they are already available. If you visit their website, you'll be able to see some of the guidelines that actually touch on pharmacovigilance and the expectations. So first and foremost, for us as healthcare professionals is to abide by that, just to try and as much as possible to ensure that as a country, we are meeting that requirement of us from a compliance perspective, that we are meeting the regulatory requirements. The other reason why we are following up on drug safety issues is overall, we are doing this to protect the patient. And that's why I put them at the center. In as much as, yes, we're doing it because maybe we're expected of us as healthcare professionals by our regulatory bodies, we are also expected to do this so that we end up protecting the patients. Because when we get to hear one person complaining a drug that is not doing well, it should be our collective effort for us to make sure that we do what we can to mitigate that issue. And last but not least, why it's important for us is to ensure the healthcare professional is always kept informed. And you'll see in the next couple of slides how you are going to be kept informed in one way or another whenever it comes to drug safety issues. Yeah. So overall, the ultimate goal of pharmacovigilance was to improve the safe and rational use of medicines, thereby improving patient care and product confidence in the market. Point, I want to bring out the essence of the different supply chain models that have been there. And for the longest time, The supply chain, especially for pharmaceutical supply chain, has been a linear chain where we have expected to see products, being manufactured, going through the pipeline all the way till the patient, meaning the patient is actually the bottom line or is at the end of that chain. Yeah. And that for the longest time, I mean, ever since I have been in existence, that is what I had known. However, with time, we've noted that this issue has had this top-down cascading event has had its own issues. And largely, it has also meant that the flow of information has also consequently not been getting to the apex, and that is to the source. And with time, a few models have actually been introduced, yeah, including fit for purpose. What has actually been working for us, what needs to work, because this current model is not working and it's not working sufficiently. So one of the things that people have done is to create access, include access in their day-to-day. I mean, the biggest discussions right now, especially in the pharma industry, is to ensure that they have access, to increase access. And one way that is happening is through having, introducing private-public partnership within the different organizations so that there is more of their products that are readily available at an affordable rate. And when you talk about access, for me, before I go to the next slide, when we talk about access, there's something that I want us to concentrate on, that access is not just about drugs, the drugs that are going to get into the pipeline. Access has also meant that there is also access of the different services that can easily be curated so that we can actually be able to potentiate that towards the patient. Yeah. And because of that and all the discussions that have been going on, some of the new age models that have been introduced in supply chain have actually been patient-centric, and that means we have now, as opposed to having the patient at the end, yeah, we've actually created that line as circular, meaning the patient is actually at the middle of it all. And the rest of us as healthcare professionals, as service providers, as product providers, we are now coming to one table round, and we're having the patient, where we're expecting the patient to actually decide and determine their care in terms of also the kind of products that they want in the market. We're now giving a voice to the patient. We're now listening more to what the patient wants. And for me, the best example really mitigate what the patient is doing would be through pharmacovigilance, introduction of pharmacovigilance in our day-to-day activity. So how is this relevant? What's the relevance of PV in access? Yeah. So by reporting, you are actively contributing towards helping us know what the potential risks and confirmed risks of the drugs in our population. It helps us to get to know how a certain drug reacts to us, as Africans, as Kenyans. Are we faring well, or is a drug containing more risks? Between the year 2014 to 2016, there have been discussions. Still today, there are discussions where we've noted that the discipline of pharmacovigilance is also expanding and it's growing. It is a dynamic field, just like the way medicine is. And what we are saying is we are also getting to note drugs, beneficial effects of drugs that were not previously recorded, and we've had cases of where we have noted as healthcare professionals that a certain drug does well. Unfortunately, we are providing it via off-label use, and no one is actually keenly taking note of that. We are prescribing it, and we're prescribing it as an off-label medication. What we're saying now, pharmacovigilance now is open towards that by recording such beneficial effects in the drug. Because overall, what we want is to detect, to analyze, and quantify those beneficial effects, so to actually indication use based on what has been started. These are some of the pharmacovigilance data, and the only way we can be able to move and migrate from there is by having the adverse reactions or the reports sent to us. Some of these reportable adverse events are just like what Dr. Anyango had mentioned. We have side effects, allergic reactions, drug use or misuse. We have overdose that can be intentional or it can be accidental. We also have medicines that appear not to have worked, that is lack of efficacy, disease progression. We have pregnancy and breastfeeding. In as much as those are not adverse events, we note that these situations, especially if you're pregnant or when you're breastfeeding, these are reactions that can if you are pregnant or if you're breastfeeding and you're on a medication, we know that there's some medicines that can either be able to cross the placenta and get to the fetus, or if you're a breastfeeding mother, some of the medication can actually be secreted in the breast milk and end up affecting the baby, thereby maybe impacting on the milestones of the infant. We also have occupational exposure, and this can be from anyone who is working in the manufacturing company. If you're working, even you guys who are working as healthcare professionals, just something as simple as trying to administer a drug into a syringe, we've had issues with bad syringes where you end up maybe pricking yourself and some of the medication getting onto you topically, leading to a reaction. That's a form of occupational exposure. We also have different forms of medication errors, and we are also now considering off-label use as a reportable event, again, so that we can be able to substantiate some of the beneficial effects of the drug, again, so that we can have that data. In relation to the Med Safety Week, currently we are going through the Med Safety Week. What is Med Safety? Med Safety Week is actually a campaign, a social media campaign that is currently running. It runs every year. It's actually a weekly, it's an annual event where we take up a week in the month of November, especially between the dates 2nd to 8th of November. All pharmacovigilance practitioners all over the world are actually encouraged to just highlight on the importance of medical reporting, adverse event reporting in their day-to-day activity. In this year, we are concentrating on side effects as one of the reportable events that actually should be reported as an adverse event. In as much as in literature, and based on my background, side effects are not necessarily adverse events. However, the word side effect has been loosely used over time to actually mean an adverse event. And for that reason, if you're not keenly into it, you may end up sidelining a side effect and not reporting it as required when it comes to it being categorized as an adverse event. And that's why now I wanted to highlight, based on the example that I had asked before at the beginning, how many of us have actually ever experienced side effect, and what did you do? Yeah. So a side effect could be expected. Like I mentioned, it could be an unexpected adverse event. This is where the adverse event that is prescribed in the approved package insert, that is a label for the approved or the marketed product or device. That's what we know a side effect. A side effect can easily be known as that expected adverse event. We also have a side effect that can be unexpected. And again, I'm using the word side effect loosely to mean an unexpected adverse event, especially during this time of COVID-19, where we've expected and we've also, through experiment, either exposed our patients or exposed ourselves to certain medications that we're not so used to taking on a day-to-day basis, either through off-label use or maybe now because it's on an emergency basis, we are providing and we are using that drug, and then we end up getting an unexpected adverse event, something that is contrary to what the package leaflet insert says. Again, this is an opportunity and this is an event for us where we are noting that a side effect can actually be expected and it cannot be. It can also be unexpected. Regardless of whether it's expected or unexpected, we are recommending and we are pushing the vibe that we need it to be reported. So how do you report an adverse event? Or how do we report the side effect? Yeah. So there is an acronym that is used world over. We try to make this simple way just to enable you to report at minimum what is expected in an adverse event. So the first thing is get the patient details. There must be a live patient. There must be a live patient who has actually been, who's been affected by the drug. So you try to get their initials, get their age or their gender, their age group, anything that can identify that patient. And with that, I would like to ask Tabitha Kerubo, you're raising your hand. Do you have anything to say? Tabitha Kerubo? All right. So I guess we'll continue. So the patient details, that's why we're saying we need to have at minimum the patient identifiers, could be the patient initials, the age, the gender, the age group, or the race of the patient. We also need to have an identifiable reporter. In most cases, this is going to be you, the healthcare professional, if you're the one who's receiving that report, or if you're the one who's clerking that patient, and they're recording that adverse event with you. So in this case, what is going to be expected of you would be now your CADA, where you're working, and your contact details. In most cases, you can leave your work details, or you can leave, you just need to be identified in such a way that in case there is any follow-up information that is required, you will be reachable and you'll be able to provide more information. We also expect the adverse event. We try to recommend as much as possible to have the adverse event recorded in verbatim, just as you've heard from the patient, because one of the chief complaints that we have gotten over and over with time from patients is in some instances, we end up minimizing their pain. Just because they do not know how to speak our jargon, our medical jargon, sometimes we end up lessening the burden that they're feeling, the pain that they're feeling. So again, if it is possible and if you can, try to report the adverse event in verbatim, just so that whoever is going to work on to analyze that adverse event, it could be the regulatory authority, it could be the owners of the drug, that is a pharmaceutical company, then they will have an opportunity to actually record exactly what happened to the patient without really lessening the burden or lessening the pain of the patient without necessarily doing our due diligence. And last but not least, we are recommending for you to have the company product in question, have the name. If you can be able to take even a picture, the better. If you can be able to also provide the batch release numbers or the lot numbers, the numbers that you get towards, on one side of the packaging. If you can be able to get a picture of that, or if you can be able to relay that information in the report, even better for us to be able to really, really narrow down to a particular batch that has caused that reaction. So my recommendation is, at first glance, during that time when you're getting or you're receiving that adverse event, obtain as much information as you can. Report the event, even if any of the above elements is still missing, just report it. And later, it can actually build up to another case when more information is retracted. So where do you report? Where do you start? You start at either if you're working in the hospital, start at the hospital pharmacy or where the medicine was dispensed. If you're not at the hospital, you can use a yellow form. Yeah, this is readily available on PPB's website. It's the Pharmacovigilance portal. You can log in over there and report. Yeah, or if you have access to the pharmaceutical company or the pharma company that is marketing that product, get in touch with your qualified person for pharmacovigilance or any of the company representatives. Just make sure that report has reached the needful authority so that further action can be taken. So when do you report this case? Yeah, pharmacovigilance issues are usually done on a timeless manner. We are encouraging you to report as soon as you're made aware of a case. As soon as it comes to your desk and you have all the relevant information, go ahead and report it. Yeah. However, please ensure that data privacy and confidentiality is maintained. We're not asking you to share any patient name or any personal contact details for the patient. And then after you've already reported, you expect feedback. Ideally, for any reaction you expect, for any action you expect a reaction. So yeah, you have been asked, we have asked you over and over to keep reporting. Are you finally going to get that feedback? Yeah. Unfortunately, this has been one of the biggest problems when it comes to reporting. A lot of healthcare professionals world over have complained that they do not receive any feedback or see the impact of their reporting. They actually see this as an added role or responsibility in their day-to-day. Especially, you can imagine if you're working in a very densely populated area, or you're serving a hospital that receives quite a large number of patients on a day-to-day basis, where you have so many patients that you need to get to finish, in the course of the day. And here you have an added responsibility that reporting events. That has been a reality for many years, as far as pharmacovigilance has been concerned. But I just wanted to highlight something for you, because in most cases, especially for people who are not working in the pharmaceutical industry, you're not working as a regulator or you're not working in the pharma company, a lot of times, a lot of healthcare professionals and patients assume that adverse reaction is just a collection of the adverse event, and then maybe submitting it to the authority. In our case, that would be PPB. Then maybe you get feedback and work is done. The reality is we are far from that. This is exactly what happens. I won't really get into this, but a lot of, from that one single adverse event that you're able to give us, there are a lot of reactions that end up happening, yeah, on a day-to-day basis. And overall, is feedback, in as much as feedback, in reality, feedback does not come to you only, in reality, feedback does come to you. It comes back to you. But this time, it doesn't come dressed as feedback, especially from the one case that you have reported. As a way of improving customer centricity, and now as part of quality compliance, QMS compliance, regulatory authorities and pharmaceutical companies that have received your case must ensure that they share an acknowledgement receipt with you. Yeah. What that happens and what that does, it means that they're actually taking effect of that, and they're able to do a lot more. So some of the things that they do towards analyzing, the back behind the tables, these are some of the outcomes that come in form of feedback. Yeah, so we end up seeing product recalls. Yeah, product recall from the market, because maybe now people realize there was an issue. Maybe there was a product issue with the drug, or there was a label issue with the drug. Maybe the drug did not come with the correct label. We also noted that maybe products were withdrawn from a market, and I'm sure you have examples of drugs that are no longer in existence in our day-to-day practice. We also get safety communication, and some of this safety communication can come in form of dear healthcare professional letters. I'm sure you've seen some, dear doctors letters, dear pharmacist letters, and many more. Other reactions that we've seen is implementation or activation of risk management plans, yeah, with regards to a particular patient group. I mean, a particular product group, yeah. Some of these risk management plans that we have seen is pharmacovigilance plan. We now see pharmaceutical companies now being enforced to PV department, have personnel like the QPPV on board. We also have other additional pharmacovigilance activities like introduction of post-authorization safety studies, drug utilizational studies, clinical studies that are done specifically geared towards understanding how that product fares towards a particular population group or a cohort. We also have seen risk minimization plans being introduced. Again, we've seen medical affairs being introduced into the pharmaceutical companies. Some regulatory authorities also have introduced having medical practitioners and having positions like MSLs, medical scientist liaisons, coming on board just to kickstart and introduce that peer interaction between the pharma company and the peers who are working in the hospital setup, in the healthcare setup, just so that they can be able to understand and see how their products are faring. We have seen educational material and campaigns, educational campaigns, especially on safe use of their products, safe storage of their products, again, could have been contributed towards the so-called adverse events that we've been experiencing. Introduction of pregnancy prevention plans, because we've noted that, again, there are some drugs that are currently being used, or there are drugs that could be used, and potentially, especially in childbearing adults who may not actually be introduced towards the drug having, teratogenic or metagenic effect towards their reproductive system. If at all they decide they're going to start a family. We also have seen introduction of safety communications, like the healthcare professional that I was talking about. And again, all this is done towards improving better understanding of the drug for you as healthcare professionals. And last but not least, we've actually seen all these effects leading towards either having an update or a change of the product label, especially for our population. Yep. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. At this point, as we continue receiving more questions, I would like to introduce us to Dr. Kibathi. Dr. Kibathi is a pharmacoepidemiologist, and he's working at in the public sector, and probably he can just complement what I was talking about from his experiences at Bomet Hospital. Dr. Kibathi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madenge. As Dr. Madenge has said, my name is Louis Kifadhi. I am a pharmacoepidemiologist and pharmacovigilance practitioner, and I wear many hats. I work for the county government of Bomet. I'm the coordinator for drug safety and antimicrobial stewardship. I am also a lecturer of pharmacology and toxicology, and I also consult for the private sector. I am a drug safety and pharmacovigilance consultant for Vigil Science. We are working with the drug importers and manufacturers to operationalize their pharmacovigilance system. As Dr. Madenge has said, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is very strict nowadays. They have introduced regulation about drug reporting, and that's what we're helping them to do. Now, I'll not repeat what Dr. Madenge has said. I'll just take very few minutes as you bring in your questions, and just maybe touch on pharmacovigilance in the context of COVID-19 management in the public health sector, and what are we doing as public health practitioners in the public sector. Number one, we are all aware that there's no specific drug for COVID. All right. So what we are doing majorly is we are symptomatically managing our patients. And what drugs are we using? We are using the normal day-to-day drugs, that is azithromycin, amoxiclav. We have the vitamin C and the B complexes, the levofloxacins. And of course, we have seen patients who are insisting that even though they are symptomatic, it is they think that hydroxychloroquine would also be helpful in their management. And we have seen patients in our isolation center saying, no, Even though they are saying that hydroxychloroquine has no beneficial effects, I want to take hydroxychloroquine because they have seen, of course, Trump is taking it and all those other people. Now, what are the safety issues that we are seeing in our counties? Number one, we of course know about hydroxychloroquine. It's a quinine derivative, and of course there are all those issues about synchronism and the rest. But with regard to COVID-19, our interest is mainly the cardiomyopathies brought about by hydroxychloroquine. All right? And we are all aware that if combined with azithromycin, as most of our patients, as we are managing most of our patients on both azithromycin and HCQ, the cardiomyopathy resulting from that combination could even be lethal because of the ventricular arrhythmias brought about by both azithromycin and HCQ. And of course, because this is a respiratory infection, we are also giving our patients cetirizine. And we all know cetirizine also has potential for QT interval prolongation. Another point I would like us to note is that most of these patients that who are being severely affected by COVID have several other illnesses. Maybe diabetes, maybe cardiovascular adverse effects. And what are we saying here? This is a patient who has a cardiovascular disease. Now he is a COVID patient, okay? And now you're giving him HCQ, which has potential for cardiovascular adverse events. And on top of that, you're adding azithromycin, which also has potential for cardiovascular damage. And on top of that, you're adding maybe cetirizine, which also has potential for cardiovascular injury. And my friends, what we are doing is we are killing our patients without even, we think we are helping our patients, but we are killing our patients with these drugs that we are giving them. That is one issue, the cardiovascular adverse events of these drugs that we're using to symptomatically manage COVID-19 in the public sector. Number two, there are other issues that we have come across, and I think even at the beginning of this pandemic, it was the WHO came out very clearly that we should not use NSAIDs to manage our patients. So what have we done? We have moved to paracetamol to manage these patients, the ones who have fevers, and to manage the mild and moderate pain. And what have we seen? A brief review of literature will show you that some of these drugs that we're using are causing drug-induced liver injury. HCQ, azithromycin with the cholestatic hepatitis has been observed. Of course, we know the issues with the lopinavirs and the rest. And that is an issue that has come out very, very clearly. Combination of paracetamol with all these other drugs, we are causing hepatic injury to these patients. And therefore, as we symptomatically manage our patients, let us be very, very keen to monitor their liver enzymes and the rest. And the last thing that I want to, maybe before we take your questions, I want to put across is about a recent study that showed that our patients who are on HCQ are experiencing a higher propensity for psychiatric adverse events. And some of them are even upending in suicide, completed suicide. Now, what are the risk factors for these psychiatric adverse events with HCQ use? Of course, the history of psychiatric disorder, the female gender is more affected, alcohol abuse, high dosages, and of course, concomitant use of cytochrome P450 inhibitors such as ritonavir and erythromycin. What are we saying here? Azithromycin is a cytochrome P450 enzyme inhibitor, okay? And we are managing our patients, symptomatically managing our patients with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin at the same time, all right? What happens is that azithromycin will reduce or inhibit the metabolism of hydroxychloroquine, and therefore you'll have a high accumulation of hydroxychloroquine in the body. Now, if this patient has those risk factors for psychiatric disorders, of course, this patient will present with some of these disorders, with some of these psychiatric disorders that you're talking about. That is also something that we should be very worried about. Now, I won't go any further. I think I'll take it back to Dr. Onyango to take us to the next Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Louis, and thank you so much, Dr. Wangui, for that elaborate presentation. Just to summarize what I have picked out from your presentations is that pharmacovigilance is all about reporting adverse effect for the benefit of the patient. And I've just learned that the development of locally relevant patient-centered practice pretty much demands a pharmacovigilance culture. So I think this is something that all healthcare practitioners really need to embrace, because this culture is what will keep us from killing our patients, as Dr. Kipathi has rightly put it. And for those of you who like mnemonics that like we do, I think now, we knew PrEP is all about pre-exposure prophylaxis, but I think Dr. Wangui has given us a new mnemonic for PrEP, with pharmacovigilance. So thank you guys so much for your presentation, and thank you so much for all your questions, attendees. So as we go on to this presentation, I am going to ask Dr. Louis to answer a few questions, and then we'll move over to Dr. Wangui to answer a few questions. So Dr. Louis, I'd like to ask a question by an anonymous attendee who is asking, hi, I'm very new to PV and would like to know, when reporting an event to the PV department, do we report an event that is not part of the common side effect as listed on the product insert, or are we to report all events that come across to us? I think this is an area that can be very confusing, and I think Dr. Wangui touched on, side effects that are expected and side effects that are not that are unexpected. So at what point or what kind of side effects do we report? Is it all of them or particular ones? So Dr. Louis, if you can answer, and maybe Dr. Wangui can chip in eventually.
Thank you, Dr. Onyango. Now, Dr. Madange talked about two things. He said people out there, the laymen, are using the side effects to mean everything. But in pharmacovigilance, we have three very distinct and very different terms. Number one, we have the side effect, the adverse drug reaction, and the adverse event. All right? Now, what is a side effect? A side effect is expected and is as a result of the pharmacological action of that particular molecule. Okay? And more often than not, that is what you'll see in the patient leaflet. Term number two, adverse drug. No, before I go to the adverse drug reaction, some side effects may be beneficial. All right? Not all side effects are harmful to the patient. And I'll give you an example. A very good example is sildenafil. Okay? Initially, sildenafil was developed to treat pulmonary hypertension, all right? But it has found an off-label use to treat erectile dysfunction because it was found out that it increased, that children who were treated with sildenafil experienced a side effect, that is, I think, priapism. And that's how we came to have sildenafil as a drug for treating erectile dysfunction. Number two, I'll go to adverse drug reaction. An adverse drug reaction, even from the name itself, it is harmful, okay, obnoxious, and number two, it is unexpected. Therefore, more often than not, you will not find adverse drug reactions listed in the patient leaflets, okay? Higher. There's now the third term, the adverse event, okay? An adverse event refers to any event that takes place during the duration of therapy, all right? Therefore, a side effect is an adverse event, and an adverse drug reaction is an adverse event. Now to our question. Do we report what is on the patient leaflet, or we report just the adverse drug reactions that are not listed there? As a healthcare provider, you may go through the patient leaflet and maybe understand all these things we're saying, the differences between the side effect and the adverse drug reaction. And it's okay. For you, it's allowed. If it's on the patient leaflet, you don't have to report it. But for our patients out there, they may not know the difference between a side effect. They may not even, most often they don't even go through the patient leaflets, okay? So what we say, we encourage our patients to report any untoward event that takes place after taking the drug. And we have a mantra in pharmacovigilance. We say, you do not have to be sure, you just need to be suspicious. And do not be afraid. All this information, it has to be validated at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. People have to go through it. If it is a side effect, it will not be forwarded for further analysis. But if it's something that needs further analysis, then it will be forwarded to the relevant bodies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Louis, for that. Dr. Wangui, would you want to add on to that?
No, I think he's explained it well. My recommendation is, if you're not sure as a healthcare professional, just report it. There's no harm. There's no harm. Just continue reporting, whether it's a side effect, whether it's an adverse event, whether you're not sure. If you're suspecting that there's anything that has been caused, that is untoward, that has been caused by the drug, just report it. And untoward, like you said, it could be something that is beneficial, could also be a risk. In whatever capacity, we just recommend for you to report it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the next question I will now direct this to Dr. Wangui, is the question from Dr. Joy Mugambi. So she talks about, could these reporting documents be automated at times? Workload is high, and in rural places there may be no printers. But if I have easily accessible app, I can quickly log in and report an adverse drug event. So she's basically asking if there's any reporting app, and just and also just knowing that in developing countries, technology and financial challenges have been one of those two things that have hindered the incorporation of PV systems into healthcare. So how, Dr. Wangui, is there a reporting app? And if not, how then can we tackle the problems of technology and financial constraints in developing countries as a way of, incorporating PV into our practice?
All right, thanks for that. Hope I'm not muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. All right. So some time back, there was an app. I still believe it's still there. There's an app by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. I think if you go to either your Apple Store or Google Play, you can be able to see the reporting form. which is this. I've also made, just decided to share my screen because I've just gone quickly to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board page. This is the Pharmacovigilance portal where it just, once you get in, it's a very simple form, simple way of getting in. Register yourself if you have an adverse event. World over, the yellow form is used all over the world. It's a significant document that is used all over the world for reporting any suspected adverse events that you come across whenever you take a medication. So just like Kenya, Pharmacy and Poisons Board has adapted it, and they have actually formulated it, made it very simple. Get onto this and report. The second one, which is a pink form that you're seeing highlighted over here, is actually for reporting any suspected poor quality medication. So you can either go to the app or you can actually go to the portal, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board portal. Another way that you can report, which is quite simple, if you're not feeling this report vibe, is you can actually call, again, Pharmacy and Poisons Board number. The easiest way you can do this is, again, if you're the hospital level, you start that referral method. You can get in touch with your pharmacist. Your pharmacist will link you up to the relevant authority. What I'm also getting to understand is, if not all, you can correct me this, Dr. Kibathi, but all county hospitals, county governments have actually recruited pharmacovigilance specialists. Yeah, those become an authority at the county level whenever there are any adverse event issues. So you can get to know who your pharmacovigilance specialist is at the county level. Get hold of them if you're working in the public sector. Get hold of them, get to know their number, get to know how you can reach them. And that's one way of reaching them. If in case you don't have, you cannot be able to have the paperwork done using either, technology, or I mean, if you cannot be able to use any of these methods that I've shared with you, just get to know who the pharmacovigilance person is, get to know your pharmacist if you don't know your pharmacovigilance person, and last but not least, get to know the phone number of PPB. You can easily call, or you can text. I think you can also text and share with them the adverse event. If you're uptown, guys in Nairobi, most of us have access to our phones. I mean, if you have access to your social media, you can easily get in touch with the pharmaceutical company as well. Go to their website. Most pharmaceutical companies' website have actually ensured, either website or social media, you can get to use their channels, including PPB. You can reach them through their channels. They have a Twitter page, Facebook page, I guess. Yeah, they have a Twitter page, they have a Facebook page. You can reach these companies also through their LinkedIn pages. Any social media access that is there, you can easily reach them out. You can also get in touch with the local pharmaceutical association. For example, PSK can be able to help you get in touch with the relevant people. You can now get in touch with KMA, we are now friends of KMA. They will be able to reach us, and we can be able to support in reporting that form. And if all else fails, at least you know me, get in touch with me on my socials, and I'll be able to help you navigate through all this.
Thank you, Dr. Wangui, and yeah, I agree. At least we know.
On to you, Dr. Onyango.
Sorry. Okay, over to me. Yes, I'm just saying thank you so much, Dr. Koi, for that, and we thank God that we know you. So if all else fails, everybody, let's just reach out to Dr. Koi because she's readily available to help. Over to Dr. Louis. I'd like to ask you to tackle the question. So Dr. Wendy Nyamusana is asking, and you being a pharmacoepidemiologist, are there currently any pharmacoepidemiology studies being done in our setup as regards these adverse effects of drugs used to symptomatically treat COVID? So I'd like you to tackle that, and if you can combine that with Esther Mwinga's question, who's asking to elaborate on what off-label use of medicine means. So just take a few minutes to tackle those two questions, if that's okay, Dr. Kibathi.
All right, thank you. I'll start with the issue of pharmacoepidemiological studies. for these off-label medications, I am not very sure. I haven't heard of any, but maybe Dr. Madangi will help with that. On the issue of off-label medications, what basically we mean is that they are not indicated for, the primary indication is not for that particular disease. The primary indication for that drug is not being what it is being used for. And I'll give you an example. There's this drug, I think some of you may have heard about it, the thalidomide. Okay, the thalidomide was a very, very infamous drug that was used. It was introduced in the late 50s by a German company. It was a sedative, and then it went ahead to be used as a antiemetic for pregnant mothers. Now, the story of the thalidomide is it's a very interesting story, because they had not done safety studies on pregnant women before they marketed the drug, the thalidomide. All right, but then they still went ahead and prescribed this drug to pregnant mothers to manage the morning sickness and the rest. Now, what happened? All right, it was discovered in 2 or 3 years that the thalidomide caused phocomelia and amelia. All right, and the cases were about 20,000 kids were affected in Europe and in some parts of Canada. All right, now, of course, the drug was condemned. The drug was withdrawn from the market. But lately, interestingly, in the last maybe 10, 15 years, the thalidomide has crawled back into the market. Now, not as a sedative or an antiemetic, but it is being used to manage, I think, multiple myeloma and even leprosy. Okay. Now, that is an example of an off-label use of a drug. It is being used for an indication that was not the primary focus for its development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kipathi. I think that's very, very clear. And thank you for using thalidomide for that illustration. So I think that's very clear. Dr. Wangui, I will focus a question on you. So for a fact, and from studies on knowledge, attitudes, and practices of pharmacovigilance among healthcare practitioners, healthcare practitioners are afraid to use PV services on systems because sometimes it indicates an evidence of their flaws, of our flaws. Yeah. So you can imagine if you actually went and reported, and you're probably shooting yourself on the foot, you know. So how do we approach this as healthcare? How do we approach pharmacovigilance as healthcare practitioners when it's our own fault that patients are experiencing a few adverse effects here and there? And as you answer that question, I will also just direct Dr. Somba Kivungu's question to you, where he asks, do you assist in litigation in drug adverse effects? So if that's okay, Dr. Wangui, over to you.
All right, thanks. So the first question, which talks about, let me go to the second question. I think it's easier as I mule over on this on the first question. So the second question is, do we assist in litigations whenever it comes to drug adverse drug reactions? I will answer this in 2 parts. I will say yes and no. Yes, just like any healthcare professional, if we are asked upon, if we are invited by the judiciary system to support or to help in any investigations, then our specialization or expertise can actually be called upon in further investigations. The second question where I say no is pharmacovigilance is actually the heartbeat of any pharmaceutical, anywhere that pharmaceutical are uses and they're being regulated. So confidentiality is of utmost importance. However, what happens is, and again, now I'm tying down with the first question, the reason why we are requesting for these adverse event reports is not because of you. Again, like I mentioned, when we've actually seen the development of the supply chain, where it came from linear to now being, we're all center-based towards the patients. The whole center of it is the pharmaceutical companies who end up being the owner, and they are actually held responsible for their drugs. Please note that by you reporting, you're actually supporting them in taking responsibility of the drugs. You get? The reason is, in as much as you say, and I will use the word quote in quote, I will put it in quote, where you're saying that you got an adverse event because it was my fault as a healthcare professional. One of the things that we actually do as experts behind the table whenever we get that report is we are big on compliance. And before we actually get to personalizing an issue, we actually get to the root cause of the issue. What actually made you not be able to do that job well? What made you actually make that mistake? Yeah. If there are issues maybe with the label, yeah, of the drug, when you look at the drug, the label was not clear. The package leaflet insert also was not clear. Maybe the language used was either foreign, because that can happen. So language barrier is an issue. Secondly, it could be that maybe the packaging didn't even have the drug didn't even have the package leaflet insert, for you to consult. Thirdly, it could also be an issue with, the package leaflet is there, but the quality of the insert is neither here nor there. It is not explanatory. It doesn't help you, and you did not know what to do, and probably you are facing an emergency issue. Those are some of the things that will end up being recorded whenever a follow-up is done. So the pharmacovigilance is not a tool. That's what I want to emphasize. Pharmacovigilance is not a tool for reporting yourself for any medical negligence issue. No, we're actually concerned about the drug and how more can the pharmaceutical company and the regulatory authority, how easier can they make it for you as a healthcare professional to do your job right. Other issues can come up during the investigation, during the follow-up. For example, you have a heavy workload. For example, you end up on, normally maybe you see 30 patients a day or 50 patients per day. Now you're forced to seeing maybe 200 patients in a day. You actually didn't have time for breathing. These are some of the things now that will end up again shaping policy, showing that we need more staffing in the system, need more staffing. And these are some of the evidence that can actually be used. So reporting actually does more justice to you as well as to the patient, other than not reporting. I actually see more benefit from that end by you reporting, because one, you actually adjudicate the responsibilities from you to the respective person, and that is the pharma organizations, the pharma industry, as well as the regulatory authority. And secondly, we said some of the feedback can come in many, many, many ways, including job creation of some of the activities that we mentioned about, and what Dr. Kibathi was alluding to in some of these pharmacoepidemiological studies. And to answer to what that question was, we haven't had any in Kenya. They are coming up, but we haven't had specific post-operation safety studies that are done or geared towards adverse event reporting, but mainly because the systems are still new. Had one guideline that really is, there's one new guideline that was launched by the PPB early this year in April, and it really gives us an opportunity for us to really, get as much as we can from our environment. So it's still new. The PV system in Kenya is still growing. We're not yet there. But I will say there are other parts of Africa, like in South Africa, where it's mandatory for these studies to be done even before a product is fully registered in the organization. So the studies have to be done in the population of South African participants. And then the data that will be provided will specifically be speaking to the South African population. So the package leaflet insert that you end up seeing for drugs that are being sold and marketed in South Africa have actually come from data based on their population. So we will reach there, but before we get there, we need data. We need data to substantiate and to actually show us that our population is unique. Our population needs to be taken as unique as we are. But it starts with you. You need to report. You need to give us those reports so that we can be able to root out for these things happening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wangui. That was a very elaborate answer. And just to reiterate, pharmacovigilance is not there to, to get doctors, to get healthcare practitioners, but it's really pretty much to support the patient and to promote patient safety. So thank you so much. Dr. Louis, I think we are running out of time. So I'm just going to really ask you guys just to answer your last questions as you give your concluding statements. So Dr. Louis, I think there are some people who are seeking some clarification on, difference between adverse drug reaction and difference between adverse drug event. I'll be honest, when I was in school, I had to just cram word for word. I'm not sure I totally understood. And so Peter Kogo asks that he got a patient taking TDF, TTC, DTG, who developed low 6 libido and erectile dysfunction. This happened as soon as he was optimized to this drug. So is this an adverse drug reaction? Is this an event? And just to tie with Dr. John Ngugi's question, who's asking about an RTA. Yeah, what is an RTA when you're taking a medication? Is it what is it? Is it an adverse event? And as you answer those two, just finish up, with some available recommendations for study, for somebody who wants to further their studies on pharmacoepidemiology and pharmacovigilance. What would you tell them? What would you recommend to them? So Dr. Louis, just a few minutes, as short as you can, kindly tackle this 3 question in a statement. I think you're muted, Doc. I think you're muted. You are muted.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll tackle the RTA, the road traffic accident. Okay, it can be either can it be a side effect? Okay, no. An RTA caused by somebody who took Piriton, okay, and slept on the wheel is an adverse drug event. Okay, it is an event that took place during the duration of therapy, not directly related to the drug. Okay, because the drug, the side effect here is sleep due to Piriton, which led to a road traffic accident. Okay, so mtu hakumeza Piriton alafu akaenda akangusha gari for whatever reason. It's because the drug caused drowsiness. So the side effect is drowsiness, and then the adverse event here is the RTA. I hope that is clear. Number 2, Peter Kogo talks about low libido with DTG-based regimens. That's a very good question. We have seen a lot of it in the public sector. Where I work in Bomet, we have seen people reporting, males reporting low libido when they're optimized to DTG. Now, that one is not listed as one of the expected side effects of DTG. They have listed, I think, insomnia and hyperglycemia. Low libido is something we are seeing. It's new, and we encourage people to report to the PPB. And the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, late last year, they came to our county to follow up on those issues of low libido among male patients on DTG. So I would encourage the Peter Kogo to report that case, and it will be followed up at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. It is occurring, and I think it's something that is serious that we need to look at. And the last question is about recommendations for PV training. I did my master's at the University of Nairobi. They have a very nice course. It's a Master of Pharmacy in Pharmacovigilance and Pharmacoepidemiology. I haven't heard about any other institution offering this course, but of course, we in the private who are doing work in the private sector, we are training people. We are certificate courses, maybe a 4 weeks course for pharmacovigilance for those who want to learn more about this course. And if you want to do a master's, you go to the University of Nairobi. But for the short courses, Virgil, I work at Virgil also, is offering, and I'm sure even Dr. Madenge has something on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Louis. And last and definitely not least, I will ask Dr. Wangui to comment on what the recommendations that, I'm not sure what MAH is in Kenya, but there seems to be some recommendations about all MAHs, I don't know what that is, in Kenya, being required to have a person responsible for pharmacovigilance. But I think you already mentioned about each county having a person. So maybe you can just reiterate and just comment about the quality of product inserts provided by makers of locally manufactured medicine. So I think this question by Anonymous is trying to say that there may be a problem with quality of product inserts by our local manufacturers. So what would be your comment on that? And then after you've answered the two questions, you can just give a parting shot as we wind this up.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. MAH stands for Marketing Authorization Holder. Apologies if I use that without explaining it further in my presentation, but marketing authorization holders are actually either the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture the drug or any pharmaceutical company that actually actively registers a drug in a particular country. And so they've been given the marketing, or the product has been given the license to actually trade in that territory. So that's basically the pharmaceutical company. So on to the question on the recommendation of why or whether MAHs should actually they should have a PV specialist. It's actually a requirement now. There was a guideline known as a QPPV guideline that came out towards late 2019. No, actually at the beginning, March 2019, that actually recommended for pharmaceutical companies in Kenya to actually make sure that they have established a system for pharmacovigilance, and that also included having a qualified personnel that will be able to articulate these issues for PV on behalf of the pharmaceutical company. The second question, I don't think I got it. Maybe you could reiterate, Anyango?
Yeah, sure. I think the Anonymous was asking about the local inserts, the inserts from our local manufacturing bodies. It seems there may be a problem. So what would be your comment about them?
Okay. So that's actually a good observation. If you see, at the end of the day, like I said, the mandate is actually with the regulator, because before the product actually gets that marketing authorization that I was talking about, one of the things that they review in addition to the product dossier are things like the product label. Yeah. So we collectively known as a product label. So the product label is composed of the package insert that we end up seeing. Now, like I mentioned, the PV systems have been developing. So maybe by the time the drug was actually approved, with that product label, the PV systems had not been activated at that point. So now our mandate, even you as a healthcare professional, if you feel that there's an issue or the product leaflet insert doesn't really speak to you, and it actually maybe has an issue, then it's your mandate to report it. Yeah, you actually have PPB's contact to report so that further actioning can be done. It would also be good to let the pharma company know, if you want, anonymously. You can let them know that their package leaflet insert has an issue. But the first rule of law for you is just report back to the regulatory authority, because remember, they're the ones who actually regulated for it to be in the system, and that would be part of the cleanup that would essentially require to be done by the PV that has been established within the industry through QPPVs to help correct these anomalies that we are currently facing. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Wangui Madenge. I'd like to, and thank you so much, Dr. Louis Kipathi, for being panelists and speakers for this session. I'm afraid we have to end here, but it's been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to to run this CME for you guys. I really hope that you have learned something new. Pharmacovigilance is an area that is slowly growing in developing countries, and it is our hope and prayer that we can all come together as healthcare practitioners to make this a culture, to make this a thing. So I see a few questions still being asked, but I'd really like to encourage you guys that to try and reach out to Dr. Koi Madenge. She's available on her social media platforms on LinkedIn. Dr. Louis Kipathi works all the way in Bomet, so they are very reachable. So if you actually do have questions that have not been answered, I see about 6, and it's really burning you, then kindly reach out to them. The PPB portal is open for pharmacovigilance, and we are slowly strengthening it. And so the more questions you ask, the more interest there is in this area, then the more we strengthen it. But all in all, I really would not want to take much more of your time. So thank you so much for attending this CME, and I really hope that it added some value to your practice. Thank you, KMA, for hosting this webinar and for inviting PSK to be a part of this. I really hope that this is going to inform our practice, that we may work together for the benefit of the patient. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is just me signing off and telling you goodbye. So feel free to say goodbye on the chat box, and you may leave at your own pleasure. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. It's been a pleasure to moderate this webinar.
Bye.
Thank you.
On behalf of Kenya Medical Association, we want to say thank you and welcome you to our ongoing webinars on Tuesday at 7 p.m. mental health webinar, and every Thursday at 2 p.m. we have the COVID-19 case management series. Karibuni sana. Bye.